everyone, this is Callimara here, and no, it's not calamari. Welcome back to my channel, or if you want to join the pond, go ahead and take a dive. You might like it here. So recently, I've been really into Epic the Musical. You know, that musical based on The Odyssey by Jorge Rivera Herons. It's kind of all over TikTok, or at least my FYP at the moment. And epic animatics are all I've been getting on my YouTube homepage and TikTok For You page, specifically for God games. And my favorite pastime recently is scrolling on Tumblr and liking everyone's designs for the Greek gods. And all that consumption has inspired me to do my own. Because in case you guys didn't know, I may have created an Ask account for a made-up goddess of mania and delusions in my last video about inserting myself into the game Hades, and I wanted to have my own designs for the rest of the Greek pantheon. Maybe it can become its own series or a comic one day, I don't know, we'll see. But basically, I am a huge Greek myth nerd, mostly because it's full of attractive, omnipotent people. That's it. Jokes. No, but seriously, something about them has always kind of stuck with me ever since I first learned about it in 4th grade. And my interest in it kind of comes and goes, and right now it is back in full force, so here we are. I thought this would be a great opportunity to not only geek out about Greek mythology, but also draw hot people, so it's a win-win for me. Also, no, I have not read the Percy Jackson books, but I did watch the original Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief movie when it came out and really liked it though. I know a lot of people didn't, but I liked it. But for this video, I will be coming up with a design for Apollo, even though I know he technically already has an official design commissioned by the creator himself, but he happens to be one of my favorite gods from Greek mythology, and I want to also try my hand at designing him just for fun. Plus, he is currently dominating my TikTok FYP through polytheistic paganist practices, which is both bizarre because I am neither a witch, a polytheist, nor a Hellenist. But who knows, if this video does well, I might come up with designs for the other gods too. But first, I'd like to tell you about this video's sponsor, Porkbun. So if you're an artist, and you probably are if you're watching my videos, and are probably using this very video as background noise while you're drawing right now, then you're probably gonna need a portfolio if you want to get jobs as an artist. I've always said this, but clients tend to favor artists who have their own official, well-organized and comprehensive website as their portfolio over those who, say, send in links to their Instagram page. It's just a lot more professional and gives you way more control on how you showcase your work. Luckily, Porkbun is offering the .art domain for super affordable prices. And all .art domains from Porkbun come with free Whois privacy, free SSL certificates, web and email hosting trials, and more. With the .art domain, you also get enhanced visibility within the art community because people will immediately know what you're about. In a world where pixels hold as much power as pigments, a .art domain brings the art community together to celebrate creativity. So what are you waiting for? Get your .art domain from Porkbun and make the internet a more beautiful place. Just use the link in my description. And now, let's design Apollo! If you follow me on my social media or watched my previous video that is also Greek myth adjacent, you might already know that I have attempted to design Apollo before, so I pretty much already had a rough idea of how I wanted him to look. At least when it came to the face and hair. Everything else still needed a lot of fleshing out, and I'm actually on a personal mission at the moment to draw every Apollo design I liked with my goddess OC that I designed. So, I don't know. Follow me on my Tumblr Ask account if you want to see just all the versions of Apollo, because I can. So Apollo is often stated as the god of the sun due to his main epithet, Phoebus. However, what Phoebus actually refers to is not actually the sun, but rather light, because Phoebus literally means bright. So it's important not to mistake his role for Helios's, who is the actual personification of the sun. I guess it's kind of like how Zeus is the god of thunder, but he himself is not thunder incarnate, you know? And for Apollo's case, the sun just happens to be the biggest source of light around. And fun fact, Phoebus is the masculine version of the name Phoebe, who was also Apollo and Artemis's grandmother, from whom he inherited the epithet bright, because that was also her title, which she would pass on to her descendants. Apollo is often depicted as a strikingly handsome young man, considered the ideal ephebus, or male adolescent in ancient Greece, embodying the ideals of beauty and physical perfection in ancient Greek art and literature. He typically has long, flowing hair, though it is often rolled up into a knot at the crown of his head in a krobilos. I think the best description of Apollo actually comes from the satyr Marsyas, with whom he had a music competition against. In this myth, Marsyas taunted Apollo for, quote, wearing his hair long, for having a fair face and smooth body, for his skill in so many arts, end quote. He also further said, his hair, referring to Apollo, is smooth and made into tufts and curls that fall about his brow and hang before his face. His body is fair from head to foot, his limbs shine bright, his tongue gives oracles, and he is equally eloquent in prose or verse. Propose which you will. What of his robes so fine in texture, so soft to the touch, aglow with purple? What of his lyre that flashes gold, gleams white with ivory, and shimmers with rainbow gems? What of his song, so cunning and so sweet? Nay, all these allurements suit with naught save luxury. To virtue they bring shame alone. So for this design, I really wanted to capture that same energy that Apollo is described with. I've read that he had very effeminate features and is even known as the god of beauty alongside Aphrodite as the goddess of beauty. Apollo to me radiates this gentle, soothing energy, and that's the vibe I really wanted to implement in my design. I wanted him posed in an open, relaxed, confident way, like he knows how amazing he is and he's very secure in who he is. And you know what? We love that for him. His hair was said to have been kept long to symbolize his eternal youth, because in ancient Greek culture, particularly in Athens, they used to cut the hair of young boys when they reached puberty to symbolize their transition into adulthood. In fact, it was a custom for boys to cut and dedicate their long hair to Apollo after reaching adulthood. See, while Apollo is most well known for his Phoebus epithet, Apollo also has another epithet, Chorotrophos, which means nurturer of the young. Apollo Chorotrophos is the nurturer and protector of children, particularly boys, while his sister Artemis oversaw girls. And this may seem a bit out of left field, but it actually makes a lot of sense for both of them if you consider the fact that their mother Leto is the goddess of motherhood. So, combined with his other domains in knowledge and intellect, Apollo also oversees their education and their passage into adulthood. In fact, education is said to have originated from Apollo and the Muses. And if you're thinking, this is a bit out of left field with his other domains, well, consider that Apollo is actually a fourth-generation god and pretty much inherited not only his parents' domains, but his grandparents' domains as well. Because let's not forget that Apollo is the grandson of Koios and Phoebe through Leto. Koios being the literal titan of knowledge and Phoebe being the titaness of prophecy and intellect. So, if any pagans or witches are watching right now, the next time you want help studying or doing your homework, maybe consider praying to Apollo instead of Athena. But being the grandson of Phoebe is why Apollo is also the god of prophecy, and fun fact, the site where Apollo established the Oracle of Delphi was actually gifted to him by his grandmother. If you read Percy Jackson, you may have heard of the Oracle of Delphi, or perhaps if you're really into the Iliad, you may know of Cassandra of Troy, who was also a priestess of Apollo, both blessed to always utter true prophecies and cursed to never be believed. Bottom line is, he can predict the future and he shares his gifts with certain chosen people. And if you guys are on Tumblr as much as I am, you may have heard of the Apollo dodgeball meme, where people who make oddly specific predictions that turn out to be true are said to have been gifted this gift of prophecy from Apollo in the form of a dodgeball throw. Don't ask why, I don't know, but it has resulted in this glorious gift and I adore it so. And yes, I do just have all this knowledge floating around in my head. What of it? Basically, Apollo is undoubtedly the golden boy of Olympus, both figuratively and literally. He's like the super handsome, popular guy at school who is also super smart and the valedictorian, a star athlete, because in case you didn't know, not only is he a literal god of archery, but during the first Pythian Games, Apollo actually beat Hermes in a foot race and beat Ares in boxing. But to continue this allegory, he is also a master musician, like he's always competing in music competitions and placing first. And he's got an acceptance letter to a prestigious medical school on top of that. He is literally every Asian parent's dream child. So yeah, is it any wonder that Apollo is Zeus's favorite son? One thing I notice when people talk about the Greek gods, though, is that they tend to oversimplify them to the point they become almost caricatures of themselves, when they are such incredibly complex figures with so many different facets to them that also connect them to each other. Or they fixate on a specific myth regarding a specific god and ignore everything else. For Apollo, this tends to be the hyacinth myth because while, yes, I get it, it's classical doomed yaoi and girls go crazy for it regardless of whether they are attracted to men. But there are so many other interesting aspects about Apollo that isn't just about his love life, you guys. And I get it, it's probably mostly young people learning about Greek mythology for the first time, and their frontal lobes are only just starting to learn to process complex concepts and see things in shades of gray as opposed to black and white, or so one would hope. So if you are indeed one of those people, consider me a guiding presence to facilitate your learning. An emissary of Apollo, if you will. And this ties back into his design. I wanted to incorporate his domain and archery into his design, and the way I went about this was by giving him an archery chest guard because I love the asymmetric look and I try to incorporate it into my designs where I can. I also wanted to give him something similar to an archer's glove, like in his official design by Elianzis, but there's such a wide variety of them that I just ended up settling on a gauntlet design. And while there are lots of gorgeous Apollo designs out there that depict him with short hair, including the official design where he also has dark hair, I've always personally pictured Apollo with long, wavy, or curly blonde hair, so that's what I'm doing for my design. I also particularly love the scarf or sash design that Apollo had in Hades too, so I wanted to incorporate that in my design as well. Apollo has been described as rather active, shall we say, when it came to being romantically involved, and as a god, I don't imagine they have much shame in showing some skin, what with heroic nudity being such a prevalent artistic choice at the time and was used to symbolize divinity. So I drew inspiration from garments that fall about in a more risque manner while still maintaining that elegance. So, an aspect of his domain that understandably doesn't get as much attention as the other aspects of his domain is the healing aspect. And sure, a lot of people just kind of go, ooh, divine godly magic, his hands glow and suddenly you're all better. But Greek mythology actually goes a lot more in depth about his knowledge of medicine and healing. And not a lot of people, I find, talk about that. And I am making the educated guess that this is because the intersection of people who have a highly vested interest in Greek mythology or paganism and are also in medicine or the healthcare field in general is pretty much negligible compared to, say, music or art, so it's probably not something they encounter as much or are as familiar with. And that's where I, the freak of nature, come in. For clarity, I am a registered nurse and a medical student. So, instead of retelling the same stories about Apollo that you probably already know, let me geek out about aspects or implementations from Apollo's lore that are actually used in medicine. Because in case you didn't know, Apollo is also the father of Asclepius, the god of medicine. For example, did you know that in order to deliver Asclepius, Apollo performed the first emergency cesarean section to extract him from Coronis' dead body? Coronis, of course, being Asclepius' mother and Apollo's mortal lover. That's right, the first ever C-section baby was actually the god of medicine himself. So, maybe the cesarean section should have been called the Asclepian section instead. But I think the coolest tale of Apollo's application of his medical knowledge in action was actually his involvement in the Trojan War. So, if you're watching this video, there is a large chance that you've probably also read the Song of Achilles or the Iliad, and you already know how his story ends. Yes, that fabled Achilles heel. His name is actually now used in medical practice and education for an actual tendon in the back of the ankle, quite literally named the Achilles tendon. It's this strand you can actually feel yourself that pulls tight on the back of your ankle. We all have it, and the Achilles tendon is the strongest, thickest tendon of the human musculoskeletal system. That's because it attaches the two muscles that make up your entire calf to your heel. Or, if you want the confusing medical speak, just in case you doubt that I'm actually in medicine, the Achilles tendon is what attaches your gastrocnemius muscle and soleus muscle, known together as your triceps surae, to your posterior calcaneus, and it's a super important structure that not only stabilizes your ankle joint, it is also what allows your triceps surae to do essential activities of daily living, like standing upright, walking, running, and jumping. Basically, without this tendon, you wouldn't be able to stand upright, let alone move. Two very important things in war, wouldn't you say? So, where am I going with this? Well, I'm saying that yes, while Apollo also knew that Achilles' heel, or tendon if we want to be accurate, was the one place on his body that was vulnerable because it was not touched by the river Styx, I also don't think anyone else but Apollo would have realized the significance of that area being left vulnerable because, well, think about it. There are no vital organs there. Being struck in that area wouldn't kill you, so it's unlikely that just anyone would have thought to target this area even if they knew Achilles was vulnerable there. But Apollo did, because he knew just how devastating it would be if that part of the body was severed. See, without that tendon, not only would you not be able to flex or stay upright on your feet, you wouldn't be able to walk. And by guiding Paris' arrow to that tendon, or in some versions, shooting it himself while disguised as Paris, it ended up being Achilles' downfall. Get it? But seriously, not a lot of people realize the brilliance of Apollo's strategy here and how it would go on to inform our knowledge of human anatomy today. But if you're watching this video, now you do! A lot of medical education takes naming inspiration from Greek myths like this, and figures like Apollo, Chiron, and especially Asclepius are mentioned the most. They're practically household names in History of Medicine 101. Heck, Asclepius' rod, which you may recognize looks like this, is used as the symbol of medicine. However, if you are American, you may be more familiar with this, which is actually not Asclepius' rod, but rather Hermes's. That's right, it's the caduceus. And I don't know, I just find it rather apt that the US uses the rod of the god of thieves to represent their healthcare system. Anyway, back to Apollo. Hermes, you gotta wait your turn. When I finally began coloring in the drawing, I genuinely had no plans for his outfit other than gold, because how could I not absolutely adorn the golden boy in gold? Literally everything else, I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants. For some reason, I got it in my head that I should dress him in this deep, rich red color, and I hadn't actually looked at a lot of Apollo designs while doing this, and the ones I had seen usually dress him in orange or white. But then when I went to look at his Wikipedia page to verify some details I was foggy about, I realized that in most of his paintings, he was painted with the same red fabric, and that's probably where I got that from. Either that or Apollo is communicating with me directly, I don't know. But I was kind of hesitant about this color scheme because I think subconsciously I associate red with Hermes, who is usually depicted with more earthy tones like browns and reds. So I ended up going for something different. I decided to look up sunrises because I think that's the best display of the spectrum of visible light through the atmosphere, and such a fine multicolored fabric would be the best display of Apollo's magnificence and splendor as the god of light. And that was the fabric color I decided to go with, this gradient. But looking back on it as I write this, I still cannot get the red fabric out of my head, so I might do a version with that one too. By Greek god standards, Apollo was actually one of the better parents to his children, because unlike the others, he wasn't entirely an absent parent, and many myths would even describe him training his children. For example, the centaur Chiron. Yes, the Chiron, who is, to be clear, not his child, but was fostered by Apollo and instructed by him in medicine, prophecy, archery, and more. Chiron would later become a great teacher himself, as we established. He is quite a prominent figure in classical or ancient medicine. Apollo also adopted Carnis, the abandoned son of Zeus and Europa, and reared the child with the help of his mother Leto and educated him to be a seer. And there are many more stories like this where he would basically educate his children to either become priests or seers. In fact, many of his acts of vengeance were done in response to his children being hurt. Asclepius, for example, whom Zeus struck down with a thunderbolt because he was worried he might make mortals immortal because he was so gosh darn good at healing. Not only did Apollo act in revenge then, he basically did not back down until Asclepius was resurrected as a god himself. Same thing with Tennis and Troilus. See, with media like Hades and Song of Achilles being incredibly popular these days, people tend to end up vilifying Apollo for assisting Hector in his fight against Patroclus, leading to Patroclus' death, and then guiding Paris' arrow to Achilles' heel, as we discussed. However, what isn't talked about as much recently is the fact that the reason Apollo did this was because before the war even began, Achilles had killed Apollo's sons Tennis and Troilus, and in some versions also attempted to grape Troilus as well. And yes, like any other god, Apollo also has a dark side to him. After all, he may be the god of healing and medicine, but he is also the god of plagues and diseases too. As established in the Iliad, he shot arrows of plague into the Greek encampment. And honestly, considering the living conditions in military encampments back then with the close proximity and lack of concern for basic hygiene, he probably didn't have to do much for disease to start spreading like wildfire. This shows that he can use his knowledge of healing to harm as well, and I think this is also very symbolic of the practice of medicine in general. In order to heal someone, you must first know the disease. You must be acquainted with it, and that's why the title you get if you graduate medical school is Master of Disease, because that's what you must become in order to reverse it. And at the risk of sounding like an Apollo defender here, I also want to mention that the reason he did that was because the Greek king Agamemnon captured Chryseis, the daughter of Apollo's priest Chrysis, and refused to return her. But were there instances where Apollo simply doled out divine punishment outside of vengeance for his children or others in general? Certainly. And it's actually one I mentioned at the very start of the video, the story of Apollo's contest with the satyr Marsyas. In it, Apollo flays the satyr alive for his hubris, daring to claim that he was superior to the god of music himself. And I know this sounds cruel and vindictive, and I know at this point I'm basically Apollo's defense attorney, but it is only cruel and vindictive without context. See, there are several accounts to consider. The first was that the reason Marsyas ended up being flayed was because he was essentially a sore loser and accused Apollo of cheating for singing while he played his lyre, which was what angered Apollo. Marsyas made a mistake in the competition, playing his flute off-key, and he was the one to suggest his own punishment out of shame. In the third account, Apollo played his lyre upside down while Marsyas could not play his flute upside down, which was how Apollo was declared the victor. But regardless of how the competition went down, Apollo still won and Marsyas still ended up being flayed. However, after the fact, Apollo repented immediately and grew distressed at what he had done. In his distress, he tore the strings of his lyre and threw it away. And let's be honest, not many Greek gods often feel remorseful for their divine punishments. But this lyre was later discovered by the Muses and Apollo's sons Linus and Orpheus. The Muses fixed the middle string, Linus fixed the string struck with the forefinger, and Orpheus fixed the lowest string and the one next to it. they took it back to Apollo, but the god, who had decided to stay away from music for a while, laid away both the lyre and the pipes at Delphi. So, yeah, he's actually super sensitive and, he doesn't like doing the whole divine punishment thing unless his dad tells him to. And this is one of the first myths I learned about in 4th grade, by the way. And it's still one of my favorite myths about Apollo, aside from the one with Hermes when he stole his cows as a 1-day-old baby. It's honestly kind of difficult to talk about Apollo without also talking about Hermes because they're such great buddies. And this video was supposed to also have a Hermes design in it, but guys, I'm in medical school and I'm struggling to find time to make these videos, but I'm doing my best. But to me, it just shows that Apollo is beautiful inside and out. He is gentle and prefers to create, to heal, to educate over fighting or triumphing over others, and his radiance shines from within. I'm actually a bit unclear about where the characterization that Apollo is vain and full of himself comes from. So if anyone wants to educate me on that, comment down below. But here is the final look. As mentioned, I decided to do 2 variants, one with the sunrise garments and one with the red garments. Let me know which one you guys prefer. Thank you so much for hanging out in my channel for a while. I hope your skin didn't get too pruny. Big shout out to my lovely pond dwellers on Patreon. If you want to become a pond dweller and get early access to my content, join my Patreon. If you want to see more from me, then please follow me on all my social media. If you want to submit fan art or chat with me, join my Discord server. And if you want more of my stories, check out my Wild Word series here on YouTube because that will make me really happy. All the links are in my description and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye!